Today's warm-up, I want you to practice multipliers and aggregate demand because we've got to move forward to aggregate supply. So let's dig in right here. Assume the United States economy is operating below full employment. So I like to use the FRQs to try and look for my clues in here. So I know that there's unemployment if I'm below full employment. Draw a correctly labeled graph of long-run supply, short-run supply, aggregate demand, and show each of the following. So if you see a 1 or an I and a 2I, that gives you clues. Those are going to be worth points. And they tell you what the labels are going to be, so just go ahead and label it exactly how they have it, and you won't have any issues as far as points go. So below full employment. Remember, this point right here is full employment. And they tell you label it as YF, Y1, and PL1. So YF is our full employment right there. Don't forget price level. So I know that if we increase right and decrease left, remember this is horizontal right here is a numerical value. So if that's 0, it increases that way. Something below full employment would be over here. So if they're operating below full employment, that means that our full employment level of output, labeled as Y1, is going to be right here. And that short-run equilibrium at PL1 is where the economy is in a recession. Don't forget these labels, because if you get something and you don't label it, then the whole thing could be wrong. All right, so we're operating below full employment right here. And this is going to tell us that we have done all of our correct labels, so we're good. Okay, now let's move on. I crossed out B and C because we haven't done that stuff yet. Okay, the policymakers pursue a fiscal policy rather than the monetary policy in Part B. So right now, I know they do pursue. They're going to go after a fiscal policy. So I know that's taxes or government spending. I'm just going to remind myself, rather than monetary policy. So get rid of that. Let's get rid of stuff we don't know. Assume that the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. Okay, so I know MPC is 0.8. I always like to gather my clues when I'm reading through a question. And I know that MPC plus MPS equals to 1. And that 1 is my income. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see that a little better. MPC plus MPS equals to 1. So now I know MPS is going to be 0.2, because if I take these and add them up and equal to 1, I get my MPS right there. And the value of the gap is $300 billion. So the recessionary gap is actually tied to this right here, below full employment. Oops, sorry about that. So I know that my recessionary gap, if I drew this correctly below full employment, that recessionary gap is right here. That's my 300 billion between here and here. So we're short of that much GDP. I got a feeling they're going to ask us to multiply, because when you throw a rock in the water and it has the ripple effect, that's going to tell us, well, that rock is how much money they need to spend to create 300 billion. So we're going to need to multiply. Now, Part D is giving us all our information. Part I is going to be the question itself. If the government changes its spending without changing taxes to eliminate the recessionary gap, well, let's gather some information here. Changes its spending, government. So government spending without changing taxes. So get rid of that. I don't need any of that right there. But what I want to do is they need to eliminate the recessionary gap. So that means expansionary. So if it's government and spending, what does that tell us? It's government increasing. I know that's going to lead to aggregate demand increasing. Okay, that's the whole idea to get out of a recession, isn't it? So whenever I have that happen, they're telling us calculate the minimum required change in government spending. So now I have my multiplier. I need to do my spending multiplier. So I know that's 1 over MPS, and I gathered my info earlier, and I know that's 0.2. So that's going to equal 1 over 0.2, which equals to 5. So now I have a multiplier of 5. So the idea is how much government spending times 5 is going to equal 300 billion. So 6 times 5, 60 times 5 is equal to 300 billion. So my answer is $60 billion. In government spending, when they throw this rock of 60 billion in the water, it's going to ripple, spin somewhere else, spin somewhere, And that multiplier of 5 is going to equal that 300 billion and close up our recessionary gap. It would shift aggregate demand to the right, and then we'd have our full employment equilibrium. All right, so we're not done yet, though. Okay, if the government changes taxes without changing government spending to eliminate the recessionary gap, let's pause right there and then gather some info. Government changes taxes without government spending. So get rid of government spending. So now I see taxes. So it's minus MPC over MPS. It's going to be our multiplier. However, there's a cheat or a trick. The tax multiplier is 1 less than the spending multiplier. So that's a little trick to keep in mind. The tax multiplier is always 1 less than the spending. So the spending multiplier is 5. I know my tax multiplier is going to equal to 4. If I need to prove that, I can go minus 0.8 over 0.2 is equal to minus 4. However, we need to know, is this a positive multiplier or a negative multiplier? So thinking about something like that, let's see. If I have taxes going up or taxes going down, if you are a person or you're a consumer, if my tax goes up, that is a negative on me. So if my tax goes up, then my consumption will go down. If my taxes go down, that's a positive for me, and my consumption would go up. So if I have these, I would do MPC over MPS as a positive multiplier. If it's a negative, it'd be MPC over MPS and be negative. So this is our positive and our negative tax multipliers. Flip this back over and let's see what we got. So they're going to change taxes. They need expansionary. They need spending. So it can't be a negative. This is going to be a positive multiplier of 4. So now the question is, once again, change in taxes times, you put delta, change in taxes times 4 is equal to 300. So long division, what? So now my answer is $75 billion is what we're going to need in taxes. And they're asking, will the minimum required change in taxes be greater than, let's go highlighter. Will it be greater than, smaller than, or equal? It's a multiple choice question now, 1/3. So the question is this 75 change in taxes greater than, smaller than, or equal to the minimum required change in government spending? Well, 75 is greater than 60. So my answer is greater. If I was answering this on paper, it would be much cleaner, I promise. So the answer to that is greater. Then my explanation is a tax multiplier is smaller than the government spending multiplier. Okay, sorry that's a little sloppy. There's my answer right there after all that. So this is just a lot of the thinking we got to do to solve a question like that. But we're not done. And you have an hour to do these questions, okay? This is the long one you'd see on the front if you included B and C. And you'd have 2 on the back. There will be a little bit smaller. Okay, assume the government lowers income tax rates to eliminate the recessionary gap. Will each of the following increase, decrease, or stay the same? So once again, I have a multiple choice. They give you the answers. So they are going to lower income tax to eliminate the gap. So that meant that the lower tax led to consumption increasing. That led to aggregate demand going up. Okay, and then that shift would end up getting us back to equilibrium. So aggregate demand is going to go up because consumption increased and aggregate demand goes up. That's my explanation. Long run supply. Long run aggregate supply stays the same because investment did not change. or factors of production stayed the same. You know, there was no full employment, resources, or technology changes. Any of these things would be acceptable answers. Investment did not increase. Capital stayed the same. Nothing showed us economic growth. So your explanation here is that nothing caused any economic growth, as in long run shifting to the right. So if there's no fertilizer, it will not grow. All right, let me show you this stuff so you can pause it and relook at anything you need to. But that is the multiplier FRQ. This is what our brains need to be doing while we're trying to solve this. All right.